Hey there, Leo Mera, Office Hours with the Mad Professor. I have a quick thought I want to throw into a video here. I'll keep this nice and short, but there was a conversation that I got sort of sucked into on of all places, a PragerU post, because they're always sharing the most batshit stupid ideas, and I often can't resist poking at them because I don't like liars and I don't like propaganda, but whatever. Anyway, in the process of this, I came to understand that a lot of Americans' understanding of basic science and the scientific method is much worse than I thought it was. And I already kind of expected it wouldn't go terribly well since many people just don't have the resources in different classes. People often don't pay enough attention to really come to understand things. So, what I want to do is just in a couple of quick minutes outline what a few basic concepts mean in relation to science and the scientific method in as simple terms as I can put them, and then address the underlying problem that a lot of these writing pages are bringing up, because apparently they're reacting in typical triggered fashion to people like what's his nose Fauci saying that people just aren't supposed to question this is sort of like just established science. It's just facts. And in relation to things like vaccines, I mean, yeah, obviously they are, um, but people often don't know what that means, and they were reacting very badly to this point. You can't question it. And so at its core, and this comes up in a lot of like lectures that I'm talking about the developments of science and the scientific revolution and whatnot. I mean, science is about questioning. It's about asking questions. The whole purpose of science is to ask questions. To say something like um, it isn't science if you can't question it, it's just nonsensical. Of course, because that's what science is. Science has to be questionable. If it can't be questioned, it isn't science. So obviously, that's not what scientists are saying when they say you can't question it. What they're doing is saying that you kind of have to know something about a subject to question it. An example I could give, just using my own profession first, is well, I'm a historian. So someone might say, well, I don't like your interpretation of this thing, and I have an alternative that I want to do, and I want to, present a different model. Like, that's great, but you have to support that. So show me your work. I mean, realistically, one can't say, I don't like this thing, and it's not true. That doesn't work. I mean, history isn't about feels any more than science is. To question the consensus of historians, you have to first grapple with the historiography, which is to say the secondary literature, all the different things that people are writing on that topic, and see what the argument actually is and why and what they're basing it on. And then you go back into those primary sources, the documents, what they based their work on, and then see, do you have an alternative explanation that still fits the facts? Because at the end of the day, while history isn't a science, it uses a lot of the same basic methodologies. It has to be empirical. It has to actually fit the facts. There's evidence, and you have to be able to explain the evidence. And what we're doing in constructing, a historical narrative is similar to constructing a theory, which is to say an explanation that fits the facts. So let me then quickly give a couple of basic definitions. So first off, a lot of people confuse hypothesis and theory, and these are very different words. A hypothesis is, it's your thesis. It's an argument put forward, and a hypothesis therefore has no assumption of truth to it. It's just, here's this cool idea. I'm wondering, might this be true? And then that's where the scientific method comes in, because the scientific method exists to test hypotheses. What we have to do is question them, question them, question them. We have to try to disprove things. Science never tries to prove something true. That's literally not the purpose of science. Science tries to disprove its own ideas. Once it fails to disprove something, it gets accepted. It becomes a way to understand a particular set of facts, right? And there's different terms that come into there too. I saw a lot of confusion between the concept of a scientific law and a scientific theory, because I was trying to point out, like, a theory isn't a hypothesis, right? Because a theory simply put, is a systematic explanation that fits all the facts. It's the explanatory model. It's the how and why of something, right? When people were confusing theory and hypothesis. So I try to point out, well, a lot of things that we think of as like quite factual are actually theories. Gravity is a theory. And they're like, well, gravity isn't theory, gravity is a law. Like, okay, gravity is also a law, but it's two different things. It's two different uses of the word. So first, the law of gravity is that something will fall. Whoop, it's an observed phenomenon. It's a law when you can see it happening over and over and over again. So it's a thing that happens in the world, right? The theory explains how and why. Like, why does the hat fall? That's the role of theory. So theory isn't the same as fact, it's not the same as law, and it's certainly not the same as hypothesis. They're all different words, and they're different for a reason because they have different meanings and different uses. So something can be a law and a theory, but theory isn't, and I hate when you say like, well, evolution's just a theory. I'm like, no, evolution is a theory because evolution by natural selection is a theoretical framework for understanding the very real process of observed evolution in the world. This is a thing that happens. So here is how it happens. This is the explanation. That's what makes it a theory. Saying something is just a theory isn't casting it into doubt. What it's showing is that you don't know what these words mean. And anyway, it's endlessly frustrating to see the constant misuse of basic vocabulary in these areas. And I know I should be nicer about things like this, and I try to be, but as much as I can, I try to like point out and share and give people definitions and try to simplify it. But at the end of the day, people do have to care enough to try to understand things. So if you want to understand why somebody like a Fauci or whatever is saying, you don't question the science there, it's saying you can't question it if you don't know what it is. It's sort of like if I wanted to rebuild the engine in my Toyota and I hired my lawyer to do it, who's never picked up a wrench in his life. Good idea? Probably not. Different skill sets, the law versus mechanics, right? Different skill sets, right? But a mechanic is really good at that. He has experience, he has knowledge, he has relevant knowledge. He can tear that engine apart, right? But does that mean he could design a new engine? Not necessarily, because being a mechanic and being an engineer are very different things. Even worse so, since a mechanic fixes things, could I say, I want my auto mechanic to do the open heart surgery that I need? Would I want to do that? What if that mechanic has never even had basic first aid training? Would I be able to say that he can question the methods used in heart surgery by saying, well, I don't believe those are the right methods. I don't think that's right. Well, cool that you don't think it's right, but that means you have to go and study why people think that is the case. It's again, it's sort of like doing the historiography in order to question something in history. You have to do the homework first. You have to look at why people say it works that way and understand that ideal. And then, if you still have a problem with it, then you go back to the original sources, you go back to the raw data, you start thinking through it and try to come up with your own explanation. And when you have that, then you post that out in the world. You publish it for peer review, and then other people can address it and see, are you onto something, or are you still full of shit? But science is an open process, just like all scholarship is an open process. People constantly thinking that government controls science, it's a load of shit. It's not possible because it's an international discipline, just like history is. It's an international process working according to specific methodologies. No country can control this stuff. There's dozens of vaccines out there because the data is public and the scientists are all working. It isn't just what happens in the US, there's more to what happens in the world than just what happens here. So these conspiracies just don't make any sense. But they also betray a profound ignorance about how anything works, about how knowledge production works, about how the scientific method works, and that gets frustrating to me. So I guess That's one reason to post little videos like this. It's one reason that I'm in this profession in the first place, because again, I care about challenging people to think for themselves. But just to remind everybody, the whole point of science, just like with scholarship in general, is to put an idea out there and try to disprove it, to shut it down. When we publish things, other people pile on and try to criticize things. When they can't find enough holes in it, it gets accepted, but it's always accepted contingently. If new evidence shows up that somehow challenges an idea, then you have to either adjust the theoretical framework, you have to tweak things a little bit here, or if you can't make it fit, you have to toss it and start over. That's how it works. But you can't say evolution ain't real because my feels. You have to say evolution is real because, and then present the data, and then show why your understanding of the data is a better model. And that follows very specific methodologies. You can't just sit back on as like an armchair person and not bother to do the work. This is not to say, again, too, this is a common misconception. It's about credentials or degrees or something. Oh, I've got some fancy titles or whatever, and that's why you should listen. No, that's an argument from authority. Arguments from authority are bullshit. But it doesn't mean you can dispense with any relevant expertise. When you point to somebody who has relevant expertise in an area and then cite their ideas, that's not an argument from authority, because there's something backing up what they say and you can look at it. It's not just someone's feelings or opinions. I like vanilla. It's not an opinion. It's analysis within a particular field. And there are specific ways to challenge that. But simply noting it isn't a thing. And the degree isn't a thing either. The particular specific credentials, anybody can learn stuff. You can study it. You can be an armchair scientist, but to be an armchair scientist, you have to read a lot of science. You have to study and learn those ideas. Then you can have an informed conversation on it. Up to that point, all you're doing is whining, and you're not liking something or you don't think it feels right. That's not actually an argument. That's not questioning something. So when people are questioning like COVID science or anything else there, but don't actually understand anything about immunology, virology, anything about the stuff, they're just, they don't like wearing masks or something. They're not questioning the science. They're just throwing a tantrum. And there's a really big difference between whining and throwing a tantrum and actually questioning the science. Science is questioning all the time. That's the whole point of science. But you have to engage and do science to ask those questions. If you're not doing the science, if you're not actually engaging it, you're not questioning it at all. You're just being a baby. So, anyway, there's my little rant for the day. Catch you all some other time.